The 2009 IBEX archive contains a structural breach. The astrophysics consensus had classified the heliosphere as a stable, gently oscillating shield, a permanent perimeter against the interstellar void. That classification is physically impossible. In October 2009, the NASA Interstellar Boundary Explorer, IBEX, returned telemetry that tore that assumption apart, detecting a massive, thermodynamically impossible ribbon of energy wrapping around the edge of our orbit. This wasn't a gentle solar-wind interaction, it was a violent, asymmetric friction point against the void. The geometry of this magnetic ribbon defied every known model of our universe, presenting an overwhelming pressure from the outside rather than a protective push from our sun. Standard local physics forbids such a concentrated band of energetic neutral atoms unless the heliosphere itself is undergoing severe mechanical stress. Back on Earth, public observatories caught nothing, but raw telemetry feeds to the principal investigators were momentarily quarantined. The data painted a picture of an environment where mathematical certainty was being replaced by chaotic kinetic shear. Initially, Mission Control desperately tried to classify the readings as a simple sensor artifact or a temporary hardware glitch. That illusion of a hardware error shattered the moment the energetic neutral atom fluxes were cross-referenced, proving this was a fundamental breakdown of the boundary's physical integrity. If the outer shield isn't just oscillating but actually tearing, what exactly is bleeding into our system? The realization hit that this anomaly was not a fleeting event, but a continuous stress fracture at the edge of our galaxy's local bubble. The IBEX archive forces us to confront a raw physical reality where the protective barrier of our solar system is actively succumbing to an early-stage thermodynamic collapse. This structural breach proves the void is applying an asymmetric pressure that our current models cannot sustain, leaving an anomaly that threatens to see our established physics simply erased. If the outer perimeter is already fracturing under this unseen force, what exactly is waiting on the other side of that systemic failure? To uncover the unredacted truth behind this telemetry and the mathematical certainty of the anomaly, subscribe to this channel and join us as we dissect the physics the consensus tried to ignore. At the edge of the heliosphere, the collision between the solar wind and the interstellar medium is dictated by strict thermodynamic laws, demanding a balanced kinetic exchange. But the raw energetic telemetry mapped a coordinate zone where this fundamental physics fractured entirely. Instead of a uniform dispersion of energetic neutral atoms, the boundary manifested a localized, hyperdense ribbon of kinetic friction, tearing through the expected magnetic equilibrium. The interstellar void itself was shearing apart the local spatial perimeter, generating a highly compressed energetic signature that standard hydrodynamic models simply cannot process. The immediate academic reflex was to classify this violent shear as a localized solar-wind interaction, a temporary magnetic mirroring effect trapped within the termination shock. Yet, calculating the shear volume of energetic neutral atoms rebounding from this specific boundary sector exposes a catastrophic mathematical deficit. The local solar wind lacks the kinetic energy required to compress the interstellar plasma into such a rigid, high-density formation. To generate this specific thermodynamic anomaly, the external mechanical pressure must be magnitudes higher than the internal solar resistance. Standard physics demands that any such localized magnetic compression would dissipate rapidly across the vast heliopause, spreading out until thermodynamic equilibrium is restored. The math fails. If this was a mere solar reflection, why is the thermal signature concentrating and increasing instead of normalizing across the void? The kinetic data proves that the interstellar vacuum is not gently pushing against the magnetic shield, it is grinding through it with an overwhelming, asymmetric mechanical force. This is not a temporary atmospheric glitch or a decaying signal in the outer magnetic field. The heliospheric boundary is experiencing a sustained structural failure, a localized collapse where the established laws of thermodynamics are being physically overwritten by an unyielding external pressure. The sheer impossibility of a single, stable ribbon of kinetic energy hovering in a fluid magnetic environment demands a terrifying recalculation of local physics. If the solar wind cannot create this dense energetic structure, what exact geometric force in the interstellar void is carving this localized ribbon into our perimeter? The structural failure at the heliopause is not an isolated kinetic accident trapped in a single sector. The energetic neutral atom flux mapped along the boundary reveals a distinct, repeating geometry that spans the entire perimeter of the local space bubble. This ribbon is not a chaotic splash of plasma, it maintains a strictly organized, perpendicular alignment to the local interstellar magnetic field. The impossible physics repeat across multiple coordinates, demonstrating a systemic, mechanical recurrence rather than a random hydrodynamic anomaly. A comparative analysis of the energetic flux across different latitudinal sectors exposes a severe collapse of the established thermodynamic model. In areas where the magnetic shield should be thickest and most resilient, the kinetic friction is astronomically dense, while adjacent regions display a terrifying absence of protective plasma, indicating a severe kinetic displacement. This is not a fluctuating boundary layer but a rigid, mechanical indentation being forced into the heliosphere. The internal solar pressure is actively buckling under a mathematically precise, asymmetrical external weight. This geometric consistency mathematically proves that the boundary is undergoing a coordinated mechanical shearing, destroying any lingering theory of a localized solar wind reflection. The data is absolute. How can a fluid, expanding magnetic bubble sustain a rigid, perfectly aligned structural fracture across billions of kilometers of deep space? This repeating pattern indicates a continuous, unyielding physical compression from the interstellar void, carving a permanent and mathematically defined scar into the outer shield. The persistent geometry of this kinetic ribbon leaves no room for academic denial, proving that the outer perimeter is locked in a mathematically verifiable thermodynamic collapse. The geometric pattern confirms a physical breach where the void is systematically crushing our protective barrier, leaving an unmistakable signature of a mechanical fracture that consensus astrophysics refuses to acknowledge. To force this raw mathematical evidence through the academic suppression algorithm and demand transparency on this structural failure, hit the like button and secure this forensic data on the grid. The 2009 IBEX archive contains a secondary energetic measurement that the published consensus models did not incorporate. The energetic neutral atoms forming the boundary ribbon are not static. They are accelerating inward, producing a kinetic gradient the primary mission report classified as instrument noise. The cross-referenced energetic flux proves this friction is not trapped at the edge, it is a geometric expansion vector tearing through the heliopause and bleeding directly into our system. This mechanical acceleration proves the kinetic friction is actively eating through the local spatial medium, moving lethally toward the outer planets. On Earth, civil observatories tracking this specific coordinate range were quietly muted, their raw feeds archived under false hydrodynamic classification codes. Back in the void, the telemetry confirms that this asymmetric pressure front has already crossed the orbital threshold of the ice giants. The absolute breakdown of standard thermodynamic logic is physically manifesting on Neptune, which is inexplicably emitting massive amounts of internal heat without a viable thermal source. This is not a planetary anomaly, it is the raw friction of the interstellar vacuum physically crushing Neptune's magnetosphere, generating a lethal thermal spike as the planet is squeezed. How does a frozen gas giant spontaneously boil from the inside out while isolated in deep space? The physics are dead. The catastrophic thermal data from Neptune proves that the structural breach at the heliosphere is not a distant perimeter issue, but an actively invading force. If the outermost planetary anchor is already buckling under this invisible kinetic shear, the structural geometry of the entire outer system is now locked in a verifiable state of kinetic compression. The perimeter is not retreating. It is being redrawn. The geometric expansion vector tracked from the initial kinetic anomaly has now plunged deeper into the system, executing a catastrophic frontier breach against the core gas giants. The macro-physical impact of this collision is absolute, forcing massive celestial structures to enter a state of thermodynamic freefall. The kinetic shearing that ignited Neptune has crossed the planetary gap, locking its immense, asymmetric pressure directly onto Saturn. This visceral environmental degradation is actively manifesting as the violent orbital decay of Saturn's rings, an ongoing mechanical slaughter disguised by academics as natural entropy. The invading interstellar vacuum is systematically shearing the gravitational anchors of the ice particles, creating a thermodynamic fracture that rips the rings out of their stable orbit. The majestic ring system is being physically ground into dust by a continuous, invisible kinetic scraping. The anchors are snapping. Against the sheer scale of this invading thermodynamic front, the massive gravitational field of Saturn is rendered mathematically irrelevant. The volume of the void's mechanical shear is so absolute that it treats billion-ton planetary rings like microscopic friction bumps. How can a local magnetic shield resist a pressure front that is actively crushing the gravitational anchors of the second-largest planet in our system? The frontier breach guarantees that the protective barrier of our solar system is not just failing, it is allowing a macro-thermodynamic collapse to systematically dismantle the largest structures we know. This physical shearing is advancing with absolute mathematical certainty, erasing the orbital stability of the outer giants as it moves inexorably toward the inner planets. To prevent the institutional consensus from permanently burying this mechanical reality, share this forensic data with anyone who still believes our celestial neighborhood is safe. The kinetic equation governing this inward boundary shear possesses no variable for resistance, and its lethal signature is already carved into the inner solar system. The absolute magnetic scraping that historically sterilized Mars was never an isolated ancient event, it was a localized exposure to the exact same kinetic friction now pouring through the heliosphere. Once the exterior plasma shield is fractured by this dense asymmetric pressure, planetary bodies enter an immediate vacuum state, their atmospheres consumed in thermal silence. This physical breakdown operates at a velocity that mathematically invalidates any localized magnetic regeneration or defensive maneuvering. As the mechanical ribbon accelerates its sweep across the macro geometry of our system, it systematically overwrites the established hydrodynamic laws that govern stable atmospheres. The fundamental rules of motion, gravity, and thermal equilibrium are simply erased by the crushing weight of the encroaching void. The sheer volume of this invading mechanical force renders any human preparation or localized defense mathematically irrelevant. The gravitational anchors of entire planets are collapsing under a weight that our physics engine cannot even compute, let alone withstand. If the core forces protecting Mars were obliterated by a fraction of this kinetic scraping, what chance does a thinner, more fragile atmosphere have against the full expanding front? There is no escape. This thermodynamic collapse does not require our observation to execute its trajectory, grinding forward with the blind indifference of a universal law. The invading pressure is actively leaving behind a trail of dead, irradiated worlds where the fundamental rules of kinetic energy no longer apply. The mechanical shearing approaching our exact orbital coordinates is an absolute mathematical certainty. The mechanical indifference of this advancing void is perfectly mirrored in the unredacted telemetry of the 2009 IBEX archive, serving as the final, absolute seal on our localized physics. The energetic ribbon mapped by the probe was never a static boundary feature, it was the bleeding edge of this macro-structural collapse already intersecting our heliosphere. The factual anchor of that telemetry proves beyond any doubt that the outer shield did not merely bend, it suffered a fatal, irreversible breach. Out in the deep vacuum, the kinetic shear actively grinds through the termination shock, peeling away the last layers of our energetic defense. Down on Earth, institutional emission mirrors this physical erasure, raw trajectory data archived under classified hydrodynamic error codes while public observatories are abruptly pulled from the global network. As the asymmetric friction physically crushes the outer magnetic envelope, bureaucratic algorithms systematically replace the live feeds with sanitized static. The physical degradation of our solar perimeter and the deliberate suppression of the telemetry are happening simultaneously. There is no engineered solution capable of patching a systemic failure of this magnitude. The heliosphere is effectively a punctured quarantine zone, bleeding its internal equilibrium out into an environment that is actively crushing it from all sides. When the external vacuum finally neutralizes the remaining solar pressure, what physical mechanism will be left to prevent the kinetic shear from stripping our inner orbits? There is no escape. This frontier breach guarantees that the protective barrier of our solar system has already fallen to a thermodynamic collapse that will inevitably consume the inner planets. Confronted with the absolute certainty of this mechanical erasure, the choice now is how you process the raw data before the astrophysics consensus permanently scrubs the record. In the comments, type glitch if you believe this is merely a temporary sensor artifact masking a stable boundary. Type collapse if you understand the terrifying mathematics of the approaching void. The physics will not wait for our consensus.